Good morning. Welcome to the May 26, 2022 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the agenda today, there are speaker request forms to the left of the dais. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the secretary. At this time, we would also like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. I had to give myself that reminder today. Item number 1 on the agenda is the approval of the March 24th, 2022 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting minutes. All right, Rachel made the motion to approve those meeting minutes. Second. And Vince seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2.
Good morning. This item is a variance application to reduce the side yard setback from 25 feet to 12 feet for a new warehouse proposed at 2801 Plant Street. This item was continued at the January 27th meeting in order for the applicant to reassess their options and show less of a setback deviation. Shown here is the previous site plan that identified an 8-foot setback. The property is owned light industrial. Future land use is light industrial. The property is located west of Deadwood Avenue, which is classified as a principal arterial street on the city's major street plan. The site consists of an office building and 2 warehouse buildings. The new building is proposed in the southwest corner of the site and is 3,900 square feet in size. This variance is being requested to maintain space for vehicle turnaround areas and to maneuver stock materials. Shown here is a grading plan. The topography limits the building from being relocated further to the west, and the 30-foot circulation aisle that's required limits the building from being relocated further to the north. As such, the 12-foot setback is the minimum adjustment necessary. Shown here is the elevation drawing and overhead doors proposed on the northeast wall. On to site photos. This is looking north along Plant Street and looking south as well. And staff is recommending that this variance be approved subject to the criteria outlined in the report. And I'd be happy to take any questions the commission may have.
Mr. Chair.
Vicki?
Thank you. So this is an example of one where when the Zoning Board of Adjustment asked the applicant to really look hard at the plan and see if they could provide additional separation between their proposed building and the building to the located on the property to the south. They came back and instead of wanting to set it 8 foot from that south lot line, they've figured out a design that would allow them to provide a 12-foot setback. Because of the existing development on the site, and I think Tanner did a great job explaining why they can't move it further to the north or the west, that creates a special circumstance. We have existing development. They have a need to expand their business. It's a reasonable sized building, and providing that additional setback allows for that separation. In addition, it doesn't create a utility or a drainage conflict. And so this is, again, an example of where, based on the direction that you gave the applicant, they did come in with a plan that really minimized the injury to the neighborhood. And so based on those criteria, that special circumstance, that it doesn't create an injury to the neighborhood, we are recommending that this request be approved.
Thanks, Vicki. Any questions for Haven?
One of the photos on your report here, shows the lot line with the neighbor to the south, and it appears that the neighbor to the south has buildings that are right on that lot line. What's the setback on, or maybe if you looked at it, what's the setback on those buildings on the lot to the south?
Mr. Chair?
Vicky?
So we had that discussion at our last meeting as well. We don't have a surveyed site plan of that property to the south, and this applicant is not required to do a survey of the adjacent property. Those structures are legal nonconforming. If they were to come in today, they would have to provide a 25-foot setback. But as it stands, they are legal nonconforming, and the building that does appear to encroach doesn't have any structural development on this property that would create a separation issue that the fire department would be concerned with.
Thanks, Vicky. Mike Kwasny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's great that they went back and did what they did. I think they evaluated and came up with a good plan. I would make a motion to approve with the special circumstances.
The special circumstance being this is the minimum
Right.
adjustment needed for use of the property. Is that a
Per
fair
staff
one?
recommendations.
Mr. Chair,
Vicky?
Tanner can cite the conditions, the criteria. If you'll just cite those numbers that you have in your report.
Sure. So, one, the topography of the land limits the building from being relocated further to the west, and the placement over the overhead door limits the building from being relocated further to the north. With the current design, the 12-foot setback is the minimum adjustment necessary, and then the existing structural development on the lot limits the location for any new structures. Development on the adjacent lot limits them from buying any property from the adjacent property owner, and just that history that the Zoning Board of Adjustment continued this application at their last meeting, and the applicant has came back with a new application showing a greater setback from the adjoining property. So
that would be staff's recommendation.
That sound right to the motion maker? And then Eric Heikus seconded the motion. So Mike Kwasny made the motion to approve the reduced side yard setback from 25 to 12, and Eric Heikus seconded that motion. I just had one question. You mentioned that the drainage and utilities were evaluated and aren't an issue. Did the fire department have a chance to look at placement here? Do they have any issues to flag?
Good morning. No, there's no issues with us. We looked at it.
So,
Where the building's sitting, and we're happy with the side yard setback. And plus, the construction type is a metal building, and so that all works for us. So, but it is important to, every time these distances are reviewed, that we all look at them carefully.
thank you. Any other questions or comments? The motion on the floor is to approve. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3.
Mr. Chair, item number 3 is a variance to reduce the side yard setback for a single-family home located at 2902 Rapid Street. During the review of this item, it came to our attention that we couldn't support it. This is a lot, it is a corner lot, it is a small lot, but at the end of the day, it appeared that they could slightly shift the house closer towards the street, and they would qualify as a zoning exception. Tanner reached out to the applicants. They agreed, and so we have resolved this issue, and as such, they have withdrawn the variance request. We would recommend that you acknowledge the withdrawal.
All right. All right, Rachel made the motion to acknowledge the applicant's withdrawal, and Vince seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That's the end of our business for Zoning Board of Adjustment. I'd look for a motion to adjourn. All right. Vince made the motion to adjourn, and Mike Kwasny seconded that motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we will now commence the Rapid City Planning Commission meeting for May 26, 2022. Again, if any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the Planning Commission agenda, there are speaker request forms on the table along the left wall. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the staff seated on the left of the dais. Please continue to keep your cell phones or other electronic devices off or in silent mode, and if you need to take a call, please jump out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. Items 1 through 3 have been placed on the consent calendar today and may be approved as a group. Action would be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the city council. The city council will make the final decision with the exception of the following item. Item 2, 22 PD 022. The Rapid City Planning Commission's action on this item is final unless any party appeals that decision to the Rapid City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Department of Community Development by close of business on the 7th full calendar day following action by the Planning Commission. Are there any items 1 through 3 that staff would like removed?
Yes, item number 2, please.
Okay. Are there any items 1 or 3 that any planning commissioner would like removed? And any item 1 or 3 that any other audience member would like removed? The chair would then entertain a motion to approve items 1 and 3 in accordance with staff's recommendation.
Motion to approve items.
All right. Vince made the motion and Rachel seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2.
Mr. Chair, we received a speaker request form on item number 2, so we thought it might just be easier if staff made a brief presentation and then we could take comment from the speaker.
So this item is a final plan development overlay to allow mini warehousing for the property located southwest of Oakland and Campbell Street. The property is zoned general commercial district with a plan development overlay, and mini warehousing is a conditional use in this district. Future land use is mixed use commercial. There are 2 existing approaches off Oakland Street, which is classified as a collector street on the city's major street plan, and a proposed approach off Fairmont Boulevard, which is classified as a minor arterial street. The site is currently void of structural development and proposed as 19 storage units ranging from 3,600 to 8,000 square feet in size. As part of the application, the applicant is requesting an exception to the front yard fence height from 4 feet to 6 feet. Staff is recommending to approve this exception as purpose and intent of the ordinance has been met. The landscaping amenities continue to be visible. Site photos, public notice was posted at the property. This is looking north along Campbell Street, east along Oakland, looking west along that same street, and looking west along Fairmont Boulevard. Staff is recommending that this item be approved subject to the stipulations outlined in the report. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Don't see any questions right now. We do have a speaker request from Nathan Barton. If you'd just identify yourself once more once you're at the microphone, we'd appreciate it.
I am Nathan Barton, and I am actually speaking on behalf of Southside Church of Christ, whose meeting house is immediately to the west of this. We appreciate very much the changes that were made and approved by planning that make this a better neighbor for us. The major concern that we have remaining now is the disturbance and the scheduling of the actual construction. We understand it's now a single phase, so that there will be construction going on for a significant period of time, and we want to make sure that it's clear, number one, that what was proposed as far as relocating the driveway and changing some of that internal design to make it less of an impact on us immediately to the west there is a good thing. But we also wanted to make sure that it's clear that the construction schedule and the impacts from that be mitigated accordingly so that we do not have a problem with our times of assembly, and also so that the impact on the, particularly on Fairmont, is addressed properly during that construction period. We do have a lot of children in the congregation, and of course, any construction site is a natural attractor for them. So those are our main concerns, and that's all we wish to address at this time.
Thank you. I don't see anybody from the applicant in the audience. Unfortunately, some of those issues are outside of the purview of the city and are part of being, I mean, I would have hoped that the applicant will be a good neighbor during construction and work around your schedule as with their loud, dirty activities. Vicki?
So when the city does eventually approve that building permit and they get the green light to go, there are some requirements that they have to meet that are just universal for construction throughout the city. They can't create an issue with the adjacent right-of-way. They can't track any dirt or product out into the right-of-way. There are some limitations on when they can create noise so that the construction site has to shut down at specific times. So if there is an issue, this neighbor can contact the city and we can reach out to the applicant and make sure that they're abiding by those rules.
What would be the appropriate office to start with at the city?
For the most part, if they're tracking into the right-of-way, I would say reach out to our department, Community Development, and we'll get them to the right individuals from there.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to keep jumping in. There's a little line here, but we recently had an issue with a smaller site with tracking dirt into the right-of-way, and this is of a size where I have to believe that this will have a temporary stormwater permit required, temporary mitigation measures required, all of that. Am I correct in saying that?
You are correct, and of course there's product that has to be placed at the entrance so that these big vehicles are driving over rough rock and knocking that mud and debris off before they come into the right-of-way.
And I would say to you, if you see that not happening, that is something to report to the city.
I appreciate that very much, Mr. Chairman. The only other thing that we wish to make aware is that we are offering to KTM and to the developer that we have locations where some of the apparently 25,000 cubic yards of material that they need to remove from the site can be placed on our property, provided that obviously that the proper procedures are followed for the city, because there are areas where additional fill could be used to make our site a better site, particularly to the north of the building and facing Fairmont.
Mr. Chair,
Vicki?
just as a friendly reminder, in order to do that, you will need to secure a grading permit to bring that fill in, and we'll need to make sure that it's not impeding any natural drainage and that it's being sloped correctly, not to create a negative impact on your neighbors. So before you open the door and let them bring that in, make sure that you've worked with the city to secure the permits, or the violation would go to you. So, but we're here to help you through that.
I understand and I appreciate that, and since I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of South Dakota, I'm very much aware of those requirements. Thank you.
Very good. Didn't know my audience.
Thank you.
All right, Mike Klosny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I reflect on this, Mount Rushmore Road went through a major, and we communicated well with the construction companies. We talked about when traffic could be shut down, et cetera, and that was a big project. I guess I would recommend that if there's a way that the two parties are able to get together on a regular basis and discuss so that it doesn't become a problem, and I would recommend that. And it went far on the big project on Mount Rushmore Road with all the businesses. So I'm sure that if that could happen, I'm sure some things could be talked out and it doesn't become a problem. So I would recommend that if there's a way to make those meetings happen on somewhat of a regular basis, so.
John?
Do we still have an ordinance for hours of construction in the city, and is it being enforced?
Dale, can you help me? Dale Tech, Public Works Director. Oh, we have Roger Hall in here too.
I was wondering who you were going to ask.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the answer to that is 6 a.m. to 9 p.m.
All right. John?
Huh. Wow, okay. Is that in residential areas too? It used to be later than that, years ago. When did that change?
This is my 27th year, and this has pretty much been about the same time.
I can only attest to the last 15 years, and it's been 6 to 9 in the last 15 years.
You've been around longer than us, though, John. You might remember some things.
Yeah, right. The longer you're around, the less you remember. You know, in residential areas, there are issues that you hope that they don't start at 6 in the morning with, you know, you got 25 roofers up there. And I don't know if, I think our HOA has restrictions. And I don't know. It's most places that I've been, it was, you could never start that early and work that late. So I think they need to work it out, especially with the church. And now, what about Sunday? Does it matter what day of the week it is? Yeah, I would continue contact with KTM and the boys and get that worked out somehow.
Eric Hikas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think per ordinance and process, I think that I have every reason to support this. I have some other feelings on it. So is this the highest and best use? Is this what we want in our community? Do we want any more trailer parks and storage units? I mean, is this the right move for Rapid City? I'm just going to throw that out there.
Mr. Chair?
Vicki?
I really appreciate that comment. You know, whenever we're on an arterial street, it's difficult to see whether or not this is the right location for storage. In this case, we believe, based on the comprehensive plan, it is. This is an area that butts up to both light industrial and heavy industrial. We are experiencing 3 large shortages in our community right now: housing, childcare facilities, and storage units. So there is a large demand for this use, and I think it will meet that need, and this isn't an area that would support that type of activity. When this came before you as a part of the initial plan development, you sat up there and you folks gave some great instruction to the applicant, and as a result, we have a very aesthetically pleasing development coming forward that we otherwise probably wouldn't have gotten. So you did a great job in vetting that well when it came before you initially. And I think it's going to be a good asset to the neighborhood. The fact that there is residential to the west, this is a need that many of them are looking for, and they won't have far to drive to store their personal items.
Rachel?
Just another question about the construction activities. So, you know, obviously the community development department is not open, you know, 6 to 9, 7 days a week, although you might be here. But, you know, as a rule, it's probably not open. So for after hours or before hours, who does a person contact if, you know, there are issues with, you know, dirty stormwater, leaving the site, or noise, or things of that nature.
Whenever there's an emergency, one would call 911, and they will direct them to us. Otherwise, we do have voicemail, and then we respond to those as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions or comments on item number 2? Motion? Okay. Vince made the motion to approve item number 2 with the stipulations as listed by staff. And Mike Quasny seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries with 1 no from Eric Heikes. Item number 4.
This item is a major amendment to a plan development overlay to allow an office building at 243 Founders Park Drive. The property is zoned office commercial district within an M Hill and plan development overlay district. Office buildings are permitted use in this district. Future land use is employment. The property is located west of Founders Park Drive, which is classified as Collector Street on the city's major street plan. Shown here are the proposed elevation drawings. The building will be 1 story in height, or 23 feet. Shown here is the proposed floor plan. The building will be 10,350 square feet in size and will house 3 office suites. The building will be located in the southwest corner of the lot, and as part of the application, the applicant is requesting to reduce the south side and west rear yard setback requirements. Staff is recommending to approve these exceptions as natural light will not be negatively impacted and adequate open space is being provided currently on the property. Public notice was posted at the property. This is looking north along the subject site and the south view as well. And staff is recommending that this item be approved subject to the stipulations outlined in the report.
Thank you. Eric Gottenbacher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of things I would like to ask about. First of all, on the subject property information, there is a not applicable under floodplain. How is this not applicable? Because this is in the floodplain, and how is that being addressed?
For that box, that's simply an error in the report. Further in the report, it talks that they'd have to get a floodplain development permit. There's a portion, southeast portion of the property, that's within the floodplain. So it is addressed further on in the report.
Okay, in regards to the floodplain, that whole area of Founders Park is, when you look at the USGS site, was affected by the flood 50 years ago, and yet we're developing in that area. And I know the mayor at the time and the city council developed that Greenbelt project in order to keep development out of those particular floodplain areas. So why are we still allowing development in that area?
Mr. Chair.
Vicki?
Absolutely wonderful question. Your timing couldn't be better. As you see later on the agenda, we have Mary Bosworth here to make a presentation on our floodplain and how it came about and where those regulations lie. In this particular instance, though, this is not a greenway tract, and those were set aside and reserved. That is where that floodway water came. This is in what I, as a layman, call the flood fringe. There is a portion of the property that is identified within the 100-year floodplain, and similar to many, many other properties that are along the creek and elsewhere in our community that do have that designation, you can develop on them with a floodplain development permit. And that goes through Mary's office to ensure that they are designing it in compliance with the federal regulations. So in this instance, all of the development that you see out here, and this is the last of what Pat Telestis, who's in the audience today, and his team are bringing forward. And in each one of those instances, they've had to design it to ensure that if there are floodwaters coming through, that those structures remain safe. And again, the difference being this is not a greenway tract and it is not in the floodway.
Okay. I'll, after kind of looking at a couple of websites for that, it does, to me, it looked like it was in the Greenbelt area, but those aren't real precise maps I'm kind of looking at. So we'll look forward to that presentation here shortly, but I did have one other question. A lot of that parking is used for hikers into the M Hill area. Is that still going to be allowed for those people to use the parking for those kind of activities?
We'll defer to the property owner. Pat, would you like to share any comments on that?
Gotta come up to the microphone. Sorry.
I love to talk about the parking on this project because, as you can see, we developed, I think, about 500 parking spaces, and we use maybe 60% of that. You know, it's a case of city regulations on allowable square footage to develop. So yes, our intent would be to allow the Hanson Larson folks to use it. In fact, once we finish this project, we have this lot and we have a small parcel to the north. Once we get those finished, our intent has always been to donate the remainder of this property and the bulk of the 40 acres to the north to Hanson Larson to expand the park.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Vicki?
I think that Pat brings up a good point. Based on regulations, they had to park this site at 5 per thousand. However, based on the use, they have an abundance of parking. One of our large projects that we hope to start in '23 is reassessing our parking regulations. We believe that there are several uses in our community that we have a requirement that overparks them. That is a monetary burden to the developer. It also has an environmental impact. And so in time, and again, this will take a lot of research, we do anticipate that these uses, such as this, will have a lesser parking requirement, and we won't have this overabundance of parking.
Yeah, anecdotes aren't worth much, but I visit a couple offices in this complex, and during the work week, I can't say I've ever seen it more than maybe 40% parked, and the use that is allowed on the weekends is wonderful for our community.
Right.
Haven?
I also had the question on parking for the hikers. Maybe Pat can answer this too. I show the photo on the screen here shows Cowboy Hill Road. Is that will that change with the building on this property? And what's the future here for Cowboy Hill Road? And then Pat, you mentioned donating the balance of this lot. What's the balance of this lot?
Haven, when I said we would donate it, we have sold this lot or have a handshake agreement to sell this lot. The purchaser of it has indicated that he would be willing to donate essentially the property going north from what's described as Cowboy Hill Road to Hanson Larson. When I'm talking about donating land, I'm talking about, and we'd need a larger view, but there's quite a bit of property extends to the north here that would be donated, and then we bought a 40-acre piece.
Is this the one?
Hope you're not asking me. We bought a 40-acre piece to the north and developed Founders Park Apartments on that property. And if you'll notice on it, we've left all the hillsides as they were. I can go back to the 70s, or actually before that, when we had some of the slide problems on Cowboy Hill when the old packing plant was there. So we determined we weren't going to cut into any of those toes on those slopes. And our intent would be then to donate, I don't know what there is there, probably 25 acres to the west and to the north of the apartments to Hanson Larson. Again, we've got one parcel that lies somewhat on the eastern edge of that 40 that we've got to resolve some issues on right-of-way. There's a piece of right-of-way that goes down along the east side that will never be developed, but it'll have to be vacated or some agreement worked out with the city, and we just haven't got that done.
So what is the present use of Cowboy Hill Road?
Haven, it isn't a road. It's a two-track trail. It's an easement that allows access back up onto the hill to access the towers. And School of Mines students during M-Day use it for access back up there. We've always provided access through the property for tech and also for the tower folks.
So that is a legally filed easement?
It's a platted easement, yes.
And is that access to Hanson Larson also?
No. That access is a small parcel, I believe, that the city owns to the west of this lot, and then provides access on up M Hill, like I say, primarily for the towers. Yeah, here's a. You want to draw on this, Matt? Well, this is, can you blow this up right here? Sure. Just, okay. Yeah, this is the parcel I'm talking about. Yeah, and we have a small 3-acre. We have a small 3-acre parcel right here that ultimately we probably would like to access as part of Founders Park Apartments, develop some twin homes or another apartment unit up there. But I've got to resolve the issue with the right-of-way right here. This stretch coming down, I don't know what the grade is, probably a 20% grade, so the road will never be built, but we've got to work through that issue. Once we get that done, then like I say, our intent would be to donate this to Hanson Larson. This piece right here would be donated to Hanson Larson, and then the purchaser on that lot we're talking about today has indicated that he would go in and give them access on that west side.
Because it does look from the map that the access to Hanson Larson, which is on the north part of this lot, is across a portion of this lot. I mean, in other words, you have to cross a portion of this lot to get to that trail leading to Hanson Larson.
We've actually provided about 4 different trailheads for Hanson Larson through this property already, Haven. If you go out and look, most of the trailheads on this portion up through here are on this 40-acre parcel around the apartments, and a couple of these pieces on the west side. we've worked with Flannery and the boys from day one on access to Hanson.
So apparently this lot then would be sold, but we don't have any arrangement or agreement with the new owner as to the parking or the access to Hanson, at least from the trail that shows on this photo.
No. No, Hanson Larson has never had legal access through these. It's solely been our relationship with Hanson Larson. And like I say, we've always told the boys that our intent was to donate this. It still is.
And so you said you've been dealing with Flannery and the others at Hanson Larson and
since the day they bought it.
Mr. Chair?
Vicky?
I really appreciate the conversation about our future with the park access and whatnot. The application before us today is specific to a platted lot, and this being one of the final phases for this developer to finish out his commercial complex. We again are recommending to approve. This is really a showcase development for the city. There is an abundance of aesthetic appeal. There's been a financial investment that this developer has brought forward to ensure that we have a 5-star commercial development in this city to meet needs of many who are looking to lease space. And in this case, he has someone that wants to actually purchase it. So we are recommending that this be approved. We are supporting a slight reduction in the side yard setback to the park because, again, that's open space that will never be structurally developed on. We also want to say thank you to this developer who has opened his door to let any of us who want to park or walk through this property to get to any of the amenities in this area, and we've been welcomed continually. So it appears that that's going to be maintained going forward.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Not shown very well on here, but this portion right here is an easement, an access easement through the property to allow access to Hanson Larson Memorial Park from the parking lot.
It is an easement.
Yes, an access easement is still remaining on the property.
Rachel?
Well, Vicky beat me to it, but I just wanted to say that I've hiked in this area. You know, I know all of us, most of us probably have, but I've hiked in this area quite a lot, not as much recently. And I never knew it was, private property. And so I just wanted to say thank you, for continual access, for maintaining that access, for knowing how important this area is to our community, to anybody who hikes, anybody who visits. I mean, having a hiking space like in the middle of town is a huge selling point for Rapid City. I think it's, it's one of the things that people really love when they come here. And the fact that, people have owned this property all this time and have maintained access and maintained a maintained parking lot, for people to use, I think is really tremendous and commendable. So that's all. I just wanted to say thank you. And also, I'd like to make a motion to approve with stipulations.
Okay. Rachel made the motion to approve item number 4 with stipulations as listed. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Kelly seconded the motion. Motion is on the floor. Eric Hikas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Haven actually asked the question that I wanted to ask about the easement, and that answers my question. I do think this is a beautiful lot. It takes full use of the surrounding landscape. I think there's a bouldering area there, and there's a great pool in the creek. I mean, this is a gorgeous property, and I think it's a beautiful plan as well. I think the way the site plan has been developed and the landscape and how the architecture blends in so well with the site, I think this is this is just what Vicki mentioned. This is how it's done right. So compliments. Thank you.
Mike Kwasny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like to compliment what they've done with all the buildings down there. I think they've done a marvelous job with just the appearance, and I'm assuming this building is real similar in color. I didn't go through all the details, but I'm assuming it's blending in. And it just looks, they've done just a great job down there, and I would also like to echo the thank you for being aware of the community and allowing people that access and helping with that. That's very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought it was going to be after Rachel, but something happened here, so I got knocked off. But can I, looking at that parking lot for a second, if I could, just get back to for just a second. There's no restriction. I mean, anyone can park there. Is there any sign posted saying, you can't park here that I know? I've never seen it. So I agree with what Rachel was pointing out, and I thank you for your efforts and for your intentions, and I hope it works out exactly the way you want it to because of the way you put the time and effort that you have put into all of this. And again, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo one more time. I won't get into the details, but there's a parking agreement I'm aware of that uses city land that doesn't work, and it's written down, but it doesn't work nearly as well as this does. So even if this is not written down, the track record has proved that this will work, and it's due to the interest of the developer in making it work. So, motion on the floor is to approve item number 4 with stipulations. Any further comments, questions on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries with 1 no from Eric Ottenbacher. That takes us to the end of our regular agenda, and we're going to the floodplain presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here a few meetings ago, you had asked if we would visit with our floodplain coordinator and have a floodplain presentation that explains a little bit about our policy today and how we came about to secure that policy. Mary Bosworth has done an excellent job putting together a PowerPoint presentation for you, and I'm extremely impressed with. I've got to take a peek at it before it. I will archive this so that planners going forward, other planning commissioners that ask the same question, this is a treasure trove of information that will ensure that the citizens of Rapid City know the history about the floodplain. So thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. I'm going to present a quick review of the floodplain management for the city of Rapid City. I'm going to include some of the floodplain history, the National Flood Insurance Program, what's a floodplain, floodplain ordinances, and the Community Rating System Program. So Rapid City was founded in 1876, and it was named for the beautiful creek running through the city. Development rapidly occurred on the property adjacent to the creek. Flooding is and has been a common occurrence in Rapid City. The USGS has recorded over 80 flood events on Rapid Creek and its tributaries since 1878. In 1909, downtown Rapid City flooded and Canyon Lake washed out. It was considered to be the worst flood prior to 1972. In 1952, Rapid Creek flooded, and Evergreen Drive Bridge in West Rapid was washed out. In 1962, there were 2 to 5 inches of rain that fell west of Rapid. 6 bridges were washed out over Rapid Creek, and 12 to 1,500 people were temporarily displaced. And in 1972, 238 deaths, 3,000 people injured, and over 1,300 homes destroyed. 2,800 homes damaged. Since 1972, there have been several heavy rain events resulting in flooding throughout many neighborhoods in Rapid City. Chapel Valley, Red Rock Canyon, Downtown Rapid, North Rapid, Fairgrounds, Sheridan Lake Road. Most recently, 2018, there was a Robbins neighborhood flooding. There was an unofficial 4.5 inches of rain that fell. So Rapid City is not alone in experiencing flooding, though. Floods are the most frequent natural disaster in the United States. For decades, the national response to floods was to construct dams or levees and provide disaster relief to victims. However, this approach didn't reduce the losses, nor did it discourage unwise development in flood-prone areas. Private insurance companies were not able to continue to provide affordable flood insurance coverage. In light of the mounting flood losses and the escalating cost of disaster relief, Congress created a federal program to address flooding. In 1968, the National Flood Insurance Program was created. Three components of this program are: develop maps identifying special flood hazard areas, provide flood insurance, and improve floodplain management. The program's a joint effort between the federal and the local government. The federal government identifies the flood risks on maps, provides flood insurance, and provides federal disaster relief. The City of Rapid adopts those maps and ordinances to improve flood management and provides technical assistance to our residents. So what are flood maps? Flood maps show the community's risk of flooding. FEMA's determined that a 1% chance of experience of a flood each year is considered a high risk of flooding. Therefore, the 1% annual chance flood is used as a basis for identifying the special flood hazard areas on flood maps. Flood maps are called flood insurance rate maps, FIRM, and digital flood insurance rate maps, DFIRMs. So how are the flood maps made? Well, there's three elements. Primarily, you've got your hydrology, which is transforming the rainfall into a quantity of runoff. Hydraulics, how does the runoff move downstream? And the topography, what's the shape and surface of the floodplain? The engineer uses all these elements in a computer model and generates maps delineating the flood hazard areas. Prior to 2013, the maps were paper versions that looked similar to this. To determine if a property or a structure was located in a special flood hazard area, the map user scaled from the road center line. These maps were called flood insurance rate maps, or FIRMs. Then in June of 2013, a digital version of the maps was made available. These maps are much more user-friendly and can be combined with imagery so that you can quickly identify if your property is located in a special flood hazard area. These maps are called digital flood insurance rate maps, DFIRM. They're found on both Rapid Map and the FEMA Map Service website. FEMA uses the 1% annual chance flood to identify the special flood hazard areas on the map. Special flood hazard areas where the floodplain regulations and flood insurance purchase requirements apply. So, what is the special flood hazard area mean in Rapid City? Your confusion may be that we never call our floodplain the special flood hazard area. We just call it the floodplain. So maybe this formula is going to help. Special flood hazard area equals the 1% annual chance flood equals the 100-year floodplain equals what we in Rapid City just call the floodplain. The level the water rises to in our floodplain is called the base flood elevation, and we commonly refer to that as the BFE. The floodway is the area of our floodplain where the water flows fast and deep. This is the area that must be reserved to discharge floodwaters without causing the remaining portion of the floodplain to see an increased rise in water during a flood. In a few more slides, I'm going to talk about the Floodplain Ordinance. This ordinance prohibits obstructions in the floodway, but development may be allowed in the remaining portion of the floodplain if elevation requirements are met. So this is Rapid Map DFIRM. The blue hatch is the special flood hazard area, or our floodplain, and the red hatch is the floodway within the floodplain. The lines with numbers running perpendicular throughout the floodplain identify the base flood elevation. Rapid Creek is not the only flood area in Rapid City that has floodplains. There's 20 tributaries within Rapid City that drain to Rapid Creek. Almost half of those areas have a floodplain. They're located in Lime Creek, South Canyon, Arrowhead, and Haynes Avenue drainage basins in West and North Rapid City, as well as Meade, Hawthorne, South Robbinsdale, pre-non-named, and South Truck Route landfill draining basin in South and East Rapid. The Box Elder drainage in North Rapid also has a floodplain. Rapid City's adopted the floodplain maps, so the next obligation the city has is to adopt and enforce floodplain ordinance. There's 2 ordinances pertaining to floodplain management. Chapter 1532, Flood Area Construction Regulations, and Chapter 1728, Flood Hazard Zoning. Chapter 1532 focuses on how and where to build. Chapter 1728 regulates what uses are allowed in the flood hazard zone. Some of the more commonly used regulations are going to be discussed in the following slides, but I want you to understand that I'm assuming that the use is allowed. And we're not going to get into what uses are allowed where right now due to time constraints. All the proposed development located in a floodplain is required to submit a floodplain development permit application. Development's anything that changes the floodplain. It includes new construction, improvements to existing buildings, subdivisions, storage of materials, grading, bridges, fences, temporary structures, tents. The floodway is the area within the floodplain where the water flows fast and deep. So we have an ordinance for the floodway. Encroachments are prohibited, including fill, new construction, obstructions, unless it can be demonstrated that through an analysis there won't be any increase in the flood level within the community. And a no-rise certificate by an engineer is required to prove this. I'm going to deviate just a minute to say that the reasoning behind this is that FEMA maps that floodway. If we decide we're going to change it, then we have to prove that we can do it. When FEMA maps the floodway, they assume there's nothing in the floodway. There are no structures to impede the flow. So if somebody wants to put something back in that floodway, then we have to prove that it can be there without causing a problem to somebody else within our community. The area outside the floodway is where the floodwaters spread. So development's permitted in this area as long as some elevation requirements are met. The residential building's lowest floor has to be elevated 1 foot above the base flood elevation and non-residential elevated to the base flood. A structure which is not in conformance with the floodplain ordinance is called non-conforming. Examples of non-conforming would be a residential structure with a basement below BFE or a structure located in the floodway. Non-conforming structures can happen if they were there before the flood maps happened, or new mapping changed the floodplain boundaries and they got put into the floodplain. A structure is permitted as long as modifications or additions do not equal or exceed 50% of the assessed value. If they exceed that, then the structure has to be brought into compliance. This doesn't include correcting violations of code that are necessary for safe living. If a non-conforming structure is damaged by any means, flood, wind, rain, fire, and cost to repair or replace to pre-damage conditions equals or exceeds 50%, the structure cannot be replaced or rebuilt except in conformity with the ordinance. So 2 examples of non-conforming uses in Rapid City. The manufactured homes you see there are located in the floodway. If the homes are damaged and the cost to repair exceeds 50%, they would have to do an analysis proving that they can be in the floodplain, or the floodway, excuse me. Probably not going to happen. The residential structure that's shown there is located in the floodplain. There's a basement in that residential structure. The owner wanted to construct an addition to the existing structure that exceeded the 50% value of the structure. So the basement would be needed to be filled in to bring the structure up to 1 foot above the base flood elevation in order to be compliant with the ordinance. They elected not to. So manufactured homes need to be elevated and anchored on a permanent foundation. FEMA has a document telling you how to anchor. It's 133 pages. That kind of tells you the flotation capabilities of a manufactured home. Temporary structures associated with festivals are allowed. They can have to be on the site for fewer than 14 days, and you have to be able to remove them within 24 hours. So Rapid City's adopted the maps, we've adopted the ordinances. How do we meet the rest of our requirements? Communities are encouraged to participate in a national flood insurance program called the Community Rating System, or CRS. CRS is a voluntary incentive program that recognizes community floodplain management activities that exceed the minimum national flood insurance requirements for public information, mapping regulations, warnings. Credit points are assigned to each of these activities and accumulated to determine a CRS classification for the community. The CRS classification results in a flood insurance premium discount for all policyholders within the community. Rapid City's been a CRS community since 1992. We have a Class 7 rating, which allows for 15% discount for insurance policies for everyone. Credit points are awarded to Rapid City for the preservation of our floodplain. Approximately 41% of our floodplain is open space, and our ordinance minimizes development in these areas. Credit points are awarded for maintaining flood-related records, documentation. The city has copies of all the firms issued to our community, elevation certificates for new construction, and our historical flood information. All flood-related inquiries are logged. Rapid City Public Outreach Program includes informational material available at the Public Works offices, the public library, the city website. Our outreach projects include the flood trail signage, storm drain signage, and our Memorial Walk events. So anyone living in a national flood insurance participating community can purchase flood insurance. If a structure is located in that special flood hazard area, which has been identified on the firm, and the owner has a mortgage, they're required to have flood insurance. Homeowners insurance don't cover flooding. If you need additional information, you can go to floodsmart.gov. Rapid City continually meets all the requirements of the National Flood Insurance Program. So what's going to happen if we don't meet these requirements? We'll be suspended from the program. If we're suspended, our property owners cannot purchase flood insurance. Federal grants or loans are not available. Mortgage insurers or loan guarantees aren't available, and federal disaster assistance would not be provided for the flood. So I'm going to open this up for questions, but I have a story to tell you. So I've lived in Rapid City. I grew up in Rapid City. I was 14 in the 1972 flood. My dad was a professor at the School of Mines. I had a lot of friends in the flood, and as a result of my dad being a professor, I got to hang out with a lot of engineering students at the School of Mines in Canyon Lake Park cleaning up after the flood. I think that's when I decided I wanted to be an engineer. And after 40-plus years of being an engineer, I get to be the floodplain administrator for the city of Rapid City. I take this job seriously. I don't lightly look at some development and say, yeah, let it go, it's no big deal. It's all a big deal. So if you have questions, let's hear them.
All right, thank you, Mary. That was a great presentation. Any questions for her? Eric Ottenbacher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you look at the commemorative map from 1972, the extent of the flood, there's still a lot of residential areas that are populating that area of the extent of the flood. Are those grandfathered places?
Yes, there's a lot of grandfathered in homes. And Vicki and I were talking about this the other day, and there's a lot of history that still needs to come out. But my understanding is that when HUD came in to buy out homes in the floodplain, people still, if it was under a certain amount of damage, they got to stay if they wanted to. So those homes ultimately got grandfathered in. FEMA takes this non-conforming, and that's one of the reasons I brought that slide into play. FEMA takes non-conforming structures pretty seriously, and that's where all the 50% rule comes in. So they're going to be allowed to stay there unless the city changes. We can always change our ordinance. We can always say, no, no more. Anybody that's there, we're going to buy you out. We're getting you out of there. But until then, yes, they're grandfathered in with the 50% restriction. The other thing that happens is, and this happened to that manufactured home park in East Rapid, we annexed that neighborhood in. At the time that they were built, they were in the county. The county may, I don't, they may not have been regulating at that time. They could have been older, but they were allowed to build there. So when we annex them in, they're allowed to stay there until we change our ordinance.
If I may continue, that's actually the map I was kind of referring to earlier in the discussion, that the extent of the flood actually went into Founders Park area, and
Yep.
and that was, of course, that was before I was on this panel, but people allowed to be, building homes in that area and businesses.
So, you're asking great questions. And I struggle with this also. Another story, when I remember living in Rapid City before the flood, and one of the funnest things to do was tube Rapid Creek. Well, interestingly, if you were tubing Rapid Creek, you were in everybody's backyard. Rapid Creek was not accessible unless you owned property next to the creek. So there are a lot of houses that came down through the flood. As those houses were pushed down the creek, they blocked bridges, they built dams. So that floodplain extents map of the areas that got flooded, it's hard to say what would have happened had we not had all these structures next to the creek at that time. So when FEMA came in, these new maps that FEMA's done, they've mapped it with the idea that there's no structures there. So the new maps look different than what our 72 flood extents is like. Another reason your question is so great is there are a lot of communities within the NFIP that go even further than we do. And they say, no, we don't want anybody building. We don't care if it's the floodway or the floodplain. That whole area is non-restrictive. FEMA decided to have both because it was almost a compromise for property owners. They're saying, well, as long as you keep this floodway clear, the floodway clear, we're going to let you use your property for other things, as long as you're high enough that the damage will be what they consider minimal.
Thank you. No more questions. Thank you.
Fire Department, Chip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and great presentation. I have a couple questions on what safety indicators are upstream at, certain areas to warn us downstream. Then also, when was the time the FEMA comprehensive review was done? Because I asked this since the community has been installing retention areas and drainage ways to slow the force and amount of water coming down the stream. I'm just curious how this would affect the new map.
So, first question, the USGS has a whole gauging system upstream. That gauging system is connected to the Weather Service. The Weather Service is connected to Pennington County Emergency Management. And that's kind of, without getting into a bunch of details, our warning system is like 1,000,000 times better than it was in the 72 flood. Your second question, and I didn't catch all of it, I think I'm going to make an attempt, but FEMA, so when I showed that slide of what goes into making a flood map, it's the rain gauges, it's topography, it's all these things mixed up, and they throw it into a program. So, as you're well aware, the more data you have, the better maps you're going to have, the better information is going to be available. So the more and more rain data we collect, the better information we're going to have on the amount of water. The topography changes all the time in that the first maps that came out were USGS quad maps, and they used a 20-foot contour interval. Now the maps that we use, the topography we use to make the maps is LiDAR data, which has less than half a foot accuracy in areas. So our maps are getting better and better all the time. What was the rest of the question?
I see, Roger, you got some input on this? Okay.
Oh.
Well, the question was, you know, I know they use a lot of points, a lot of data points to figure out these mappings, and in a community I was before, they would get a LOMAR, they'd get something done to get out of the floodplain for a development, and, I mean, because that was boots on the ground doing a survey, and I was just wondering, cause, you know, I'm new to this community, and I love it, but I also notice all the retention areas and the drainage areas where, you know, it's to slow the water down and the runoff and stuff, and I was just curious how those points would affect.
So, all right, remember when I showed you the map of all the 20 drainages that lead into Rapid Creek? Well, not only am I the floodplain administrator, but I also happen to be the stormwater engineer for the city of Rapid. And every one of those drainage basins has a whole system of detention ponds that run from the top down to the bottom, that we've calculated how much water we need to detain at a certain point so that we don't flood the next person, so we don't flood the next person. Is it a perfect system? No. And, you know, there's always a chance that you're going to flood the person downstream. You know, we do our best to monitor how the water is flowing, where it's flowing. I think that's why FEMA always says, you know, the National Flood Insurance Program is always pushing, doesn't matter where you live, you could flood. So even if you're not in a floodplain, you have a likely chance you're going to flood. Whenever a development comes in, we look at the drainage, we look at what's upstream of them, what's downstream of them, we give them a requirement that you have to detain a certain amount of water on your property. The other thing you said, and I didn't bring it up in this presentation because I was trying to keep it shorter, but you mentioned LOMAR, Letter of Map Revision. So if you don't agree with FEMA's maps, or you want to make a change to their maps, you have an option to do a letter of map revision to their maps. They're very costly, they're very time consuming, but if you go through the process, you can change the way the floodplain map looks. Along with the letter of map revision, let's say your house is in the floodplain and you think your house is higher than the floodplain and you shouldn't be flooding, and FEMA's maps are wrong. You have the option of doing what's called a letter of map amendment, removing your structure only from the floodplain. So you can have a survey done. If the ground adjacent to your house is at the base flood elevation, FEMA will remove your structure from the floodplain. You then no longer are required to have flood insurance.
Can I?
How does the process compare in the time to the LOMAR? Pretty quick turnaround for a letter of map amendment. Depends on how busy FEMA is. They've sped up the process. It used to be you had to submit the application by mail, took forever. Now a engineer can log on, submit all their information online, and I've heard turnarounds in less than a week. The letter of map revision process, recently we remapped Lime Creek. City of Rapid City paid for a map revision for Lime Creek. Lime Creek, when it was originally mapped, was mapped using quad maps. The whole center line of Lime Creek was off. So if you went into the Lime Creek floodplain area and looked at it, there were people that were on top of a ridge in the 100-year floodplain, and there were people down next to Lime Creek that weren't in the floodplain. So we knew that the mapping was wrong. And so we hired a consultant, we had them go in, remap all of Lime Creek. It took us 3 years from the start of our project until FEMA finally said, yes, we agree with your new maps. Our new maps for Lime Creek just were approved a month ago.
Can I jump in quick and just piggyback off something here? So let's say recent history, there have been a couple major drainage retention ponds built down here, and the 12th Street project brought in those 6-foot culverts going across St. Joe and Maine. That had to change greatly the stormwater profile for a section of Rapid City. Does that get submitted then to look if it changes the floodway, or is that just on a...
If they're in the floodplain, then yes, they get looked at. Most of these ponds that you're seeing along the creek right now, they're actually stormwater quality ponds. And, you know, I'm going to wear my other hat here and be the stormwater engineer. When I started with the city 16 years ago, one of my goals as a stormwater engineer, because besides that I'm the stormwater management planner for the city of Rapid, but one of my goals was that we have ponds and water quality features at the base of every one of our drainage basins leading down to the creek, so we can actually clean up the water before it hits the creek. So some of those things that you see are more or less facilities just to clean up the water. They're not necessarily detaining water.
Don't they have like flow structures though that
Yes.
decrease the speed at which
They
drainage
decrease the
reaches the
speed,
creek?
but they also kind of retain it long enough to clean it up before it gets into the creek.
Okay. Rachel, I'll get out of the way.
I think that's a great question. So I've got a couple questions about hydrology, and one of them is, you know, we talk about frequency events. You know, you've got your 1%, 100-year flood event, things like that. Are you aware of the USGS or other government bodies or whatever amending or looking again at those frequencies to see if there are any effects from climate change, if, you know, what we used to consider a 100-year event is now maybe more like a 75-year event?
Yeah, good question. And there's constant discussion about what is the appropriate rainfall quantity. It changes all the time. There's maps where, in fact, we just are doing what we call a silver jacket project with the Army Corps of Engineers. And it's a grant project, but we in effect, change the rainfall amounts. We change what we consider to be a 1% event, and we look at all the different areas that would get flooded in that scenario. And what we're actually using that data for is Pennington County Emergency Management. We're looking at these different, back to the question of how do we keep track of what flows are coming and when and how. So if we know a certain flow is coming down Rapid Creek now, we've mapped out different scenarios of what's going to get flooded, and Pennington County Emergency Management can go to these other maps and look and see where they possibly need to send emergency vehicles within the city.
I'm sorry.
It's a constant change. The other thing I'm going to jump onto with your question is other communities, and I just found this out like a couple of weeks ago at a seminar, other communities don't use the 1% annual flood. They say, no, that's too great, we're going lower than that. And so they're increasing their floodplains and saying, we feel like the risk is more than that, so we're going to go higher. So they're once again saying, we're going to go above and beyond what the National Flood Insurance Program says we have to do.
Thank you. And then, so I'm just going to get political just for a second. There were a couple years ago when the Water Board was taken over by people who didn't believe in any government spending, and they started defunding, I think, the stream gauges. And I think that's just something that I wanted to bring up because, you know, I'm moving, but that was scary. That was really scary to think about the, you know, the impacts of that.
So, jumping onto that, the City of Rapid actually, we have a joint funding agreement with Usgs to use those gauges and put in gauges. So, you know, even though sometimes you hear where funding's being taken away, some of the money that we as citizens of Rapid City contribute goes to the gauges that are out there to warn us what's coming.
That's good to know. And then just one more question. You were talking about, you know, the FEMA floodplain, you know, those boundaries for, you know, the 100-year event. And that I didn't know that those boundaries are based on the assumption of all of it being open space. So just kind of logically, to me, that seems like those boundaries are actually not conservative. That in, you know, in our case, if it's 41% open space, 59% not open space, that you know, the backing up that we saw in 1972, you know, in bridges and things, creating, you know, kind of detention, that we could see not as bad necessarily, but similar things happening simply because there are still a lot of homes in those spaces. Is that correct?
The bridges are taken into account. Let me back up and say that FEMA, they take into account bridges, culverts, structures like that.
Yeah.
They don't take into account a home.
Yeah.
They won't survey in that home. And I agree 100% with you. I think it's conservative. It's, you know, it's a best guess. And I think that's why other communities go and say, no, we don't want anything here. Rapid City has chosen a middle ground. As time goes on, you know, we can change it.
So just one more question. Sorry. So for these homes that were, you know, after the 72 flood, they elected to keep their home even though they're still within the floodplain boundary, and they are legal non-conforming in a sense. So if they needed to repair their home, you know, past 50%, they essentially would not be able to do so. And in a sense, those homes have lost a lot of value simply because they chose to keep them rather than.
And
wow, okay.
So the idea was originally that those homes would deteriorate and then the city would step in and have a buyout program.
Okay.
And over the years, there's been no funding, and the original idea to come in and buy out the homes never materialized. And so as time goes on, it's just been allowed to stay.
So unfortunately, those homeowners missed an opportunity.
And the other question is, do the homeowners even know it?
Yeah, I wouldn't know. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Vince?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Bosworth, I was 14 in 72 as well, so I know this has obviously been on your mind for a long time, and you've dedicated your life's work to this. So I appreciate everything that you presented today, and thank you for the information. It's fascinating and sad, and it's interesting that we are working forward to preventing something like this from ever happening again. But it takes a lot of work, a lot of dedication, and you've shown it. Just an observation or a quick question regarding how often does it change? I mean, water, when it wants to, water is a powerful force, and it goes where it wants to go. So how often has that floodplain changed, or at least the fringes?
So there's been a lot of map revisions since our original. Ironically, the first map that was done, and it was a preliminary map submitted to Rapid City in February 1972. If you go back to that map, almost every home that was wiped out was in that original map shown to be in the floodplain. Pretty sad. So in 1989 is when we got our official first maps. We've had, I want to say, a dozen revisions since that 1989 where they've changed our entire, they've come in, re-looked at everything. The city has made several revisions to the tributaries because the tributaries were poorly mapped. So we've come in and made changes there. Our Rapid Creek floodplain hasn't changed since 1989, other than, this is probably too much information, but they changed the datum to match more current surveying datums. Other than that, the boundaries itself haven't changed. I would love to see a new mapping for Rapid Creek. It's going to be funding based. I've heard rumors that FEMA is talking about, they're on East River right now redoing everything with LIDAR. There's rumors that western part of South Dakota is next. I would like to say that maybe in the next 10 years we'll have a LIDAR-based map, which I think that is going to make, it will give me a lot more confidence in that we're truly seeing what's on the ground compared to what the math is. But, you know, it is math, and it is a guess, and it's the best guess.
Well, I'm looking forward to when you say you have confidence. So, thank you.
Roger?
Oh, thank you, Eric. Most of you haven't met me yet. I'm Roger Hall. I'm the interim city engineer. And I just want to say how remarkable it is to listen to somebody that knows their business really, really well, and that's Mary. She's one of those people behind the scenes down here at engineering, working day in and day out. And as you've seen, she's got a passion for this and doing a remarkable job protecting the city of Rapid City and the citizens of Rapid City. She has a very challenging position, and I admire her a lot. Nobody knows this business better than she does, so I just wanted to put that out there. She's one of those great people behind the scenes. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Eric Heikes?
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a lot of what our office does now is managing stormwater in ways that are superficial and aesthetic. Low impact development, I think, is the future, and this will help buffer a lot of the concerns that Mary's talking about. I think the way we handle these things is every designer's responsibility. And the one thing I'm starting to learn from like bioswales and green roofs and things like that, that managing stormwater is expensive. And if it's done properly, it can be very visual, but it's not cheap. And I think that old scarcity mindset around here and development and doing regional detention facilities and small basins that just really look terrible and are done cheaply, those days I think are hopefully in our past. I'd like to see us continue the work we're doing in innovative ways that Mary's had a lot to do with in making stormwater beautiful and beneficial and actually part of the life that we have here in Rapid City. So thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Mary.
Thank you.
Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mary, that was a great presentation, and thank you for everything you've done. I was just curious, during the flood, there was damage and fatalities all up and down the corridor, Blackhawk, Rockerville, et cetera. Did any of those smaller communities, I guess, adapt any of this after the 72 flood, or was there collaboration between Rapid City and the smaller communities to adjust their game plan?
Yeah, so it's a lot of the new mapping that came out is Pennington County, not just Rapid City. And ironically, there's a floodplain coordinator in every small city within this area. They're dedicated. They're not always as in tune with the regulations as, say, Rapid City is. I get a lot of phone calls from outlying communities that'll call me for assistance. So Rapid City certainly takes the forefront in our area with floodplain management, but all the communities are aware of their floodplain.
Vicki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we're wrapping up, some of us have other meetings to get to. With a short agenda, we had all bets that we'd be out of here by 8. But Mary brings some great information to the table today. I'll just add that we get audited by FEMA. Many of you, when you are looking at a project plan and you see it's in the floodplain and you question whether or not we're scrutinizing it heavily enough, well, it has to go through Mary's desk to get a thumbs up. And FEMA looks at this too. And it has a direct impact on the insurance rates that all of us would have to pay if we breach those obligations. And so there's been a unified effort by all employees that it truly follows the lead of Mary, and that if it is not appropriate, we stand behind that decision. Rachel, you did make your comment about 50% damage, and somewhat shameful that if we have a home that still has use to it, we do still issue building permits if it's for safety, if they need to change out a fuse box, or if they've got a plumbing issue that has got to be resolved. We still do those. It's just the retention of the structure itself, with the goal being that in time there will be an alternate use on that property. Daryl wanted to remind all of you that we do have a special commemorative days of events coming up in June to really recognize and honor what our community has gone through and where we are today since the 72 flood. Mary Bosworth, myself, and Jeff Bigler will be sitting on a discussion panel. Hopefully some of you can join us. Daryl will be emailing each of you an agenda that explains the events and the days of the events, and if possible, we would love to see you attend as many as possible, just to truly embrace the history and where we are today. I'll also ask each of you that if you get a chance, walk into the entryway to our joint departments, Public Works and Community Development. Mary has put together kind of a picture board wall of the story of the flood. It is extremely impressive, and it's worth a stop and glance at. So with that, I think that we probably need to start wrapping it up, as some of us have other obligations to get to.
All right, Rachel, did you chime in with the motion?
I'll chime in with a motion for a second, but I just want to clarify. I didn't mean that it's shameful that the city would hold, people to safety standards. I just think it's shameful that people miss their opportunity. But yeah, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All right, Rachel made the motion to adjourn. Vince seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.